Good morning. We are talking about Module 15, which is how evolution creates biodiversity. All right, so some key terms here. Evolution, you should know this from bio, but it's just a change in the genetic composition of an organism or a population. Microevolution versus macro. Micro is on a smaller scale, so it's at the species level, whereas macro is a whole genre, a whole family, class. So micro would be, one specific organism, whereas macro is like everything that's related to it. And then genes are what hold chromosomes, and chromosomes are what display genetic material. All right, so the difference between genotype and phenotype, also a bioterm. Genotype is looking at genes. So what are your gene makeup? So if we were to look at this picture down here, this is genotype. So what are your alleles look like? What is your genetic makeup? Phenotype is how they're displayed. So this would be phenotype. So it's looking at physical characteristics. So blue eyes, brown eyes, in this case, normal wings, wrinkled wings. So genotype, genes, phenotype, display. All right. So the way mutations occur or the way things change evolutionary is through mutations. And so mutations can be good, mutations can be bad. A mutation that's good will allow for the organism to thrive and then pass on that mutation. A mutation that is bad, the organism probably won't live to reproductive age, and so it won't be able to pass on its genes. Some mutations aren't devastating, and so some mutations are not beneficial. They're just different. So, for example, blue eyes versus brown eyes for humans. So neither one of those are, devastating. They're just a mutation that creates different characteristics. In the wild, a mutation could lead to it better surviving, or a mutation could allow it to still reproduce, but it's not necessarily beneficial. So it just is there and around, and so there's just a variety of mutations. And mutations are passed on through genetic material, and they're passed on, or they're basically just a difference in the when reproduction is occurring and the alleles are reproducing. They're basically just a change in the DNA. So it's natural. And that occurs with recombination. So when genes are reproduced, or when the cell, not genes, but when the cell is reproducing, recombination occurs. So this also is bio. And we're not going to go into any more detail than that. We just need to know why there's differences in the community. So we're not going to go into genetics again or anything like that. But the way mutations occur is recombination. So different things are recombined that produces different phenotypes, and those phenotypes could be better. So take, for example, Darwin's finches, different beak sizes. So different beak sizes on different islands meant surviving or not because of the different seed types. So we had different finches that had different beak sizes in order to accommodate the seeds. And genetically, that was better, that phenotype, because it allowed them to eat more. So the organisms that eat more reproduce more, and then we get organisms in abundance of those kinds on different islands. And humans or everything that is reproducing, which is everything, goes through mutations. So there's always mutations, and they can be good and bad, and that's from recombination. All right, so looking at this, we've got just a little tidbit on what recombination is. So the maternal chromosome, paternal chromosome, we've got replication occurring. There's crossing over. Where there's crossing over, there is genes switching. And so you can see over here, you've got, there is a recombination from this and this. So you can see that they're different. And so this organism is going to display maybe different characteristics than the mom or dad. So that would allow different phenotypes to display. There's also chance for mutations. There's also chance for things to not really copy over correctly, and that's where mutations occur. So this recombination allows for organisms to look different, but also genetic material to slightly change. All right, so there's a couple different types of evolution as well. So we've got artificial and natural evolution. So artificial selection is a type of evolution. So think of a dog, for example. So we've got numerous dog breeds, and those are not necessarily natural. They didn't occur out in nature. But we artificially selected for certain things, certain traits for certain dogs. We've done the same thing with wheat plants, a lot of our food. We're not talking about GMOs, so we're not talking about genetically modified right now. We're just talking about selecting for certain traits and then reproducing those certain traits. We do it with livestock, all kinds of things. So once again, I'm not talking about GMOs yet. We're just talking about I'm picking this dog because it's the top dog, and I'm breeding it with this top dog because there's certain traits. So that's artificial selection. And then we've got the dog. So you can see everything. This is our phylogenetic tree. So here we've got our wolf, who is a descendant of all of these dogs. And so these were all artificially selected. So we've got all these huge variety of dogs because of slight mutations in the genes allowed for a dog to be smaller, lighter, maybe more energetic. And then we wanted those traits for specific things. So we selected dogs very similar and over time bred them for certain traits. And then we get this huge variety of dogs. So that's artificial selection on animals. And then we can have natural selection. So natural selection would be environment. So what does the environment look like? And is it going to select for the beak type, for example, or animals with lots of hair versus no hair? So the key ideas of theory of evolution are these main ideas. So individuals produce an excess of offspring. That's beneficial because then those genes are going to be carried on. Not all offspring can survive. That's just a given. And so the ones that are more adept will survive. The ones that are not as adept will not. They differ in their traits, so nothing looks the same. And there's slight mutations, slight differences in everybody. And so those differences allow for better selection. Differences in traits can be passed on from parents to offspring, so that's a given. And then differences in traits are associated with differences in the ability to survive and reproduce. So, like I said, the key here is survival. If you can survive long enough to reproduce, then your genes will be carried on. So those are the key ideas of evolution. So here we've got natural selection of a fish. So we've got these, or not a fish, of what the fish is eating. So we've got the first generation. We can see they look very similar. So their offspring, they've got 3 large, 1 small. Well, the fish can see the large ones. And so the fish goes for the large ones. So now we've only got 1 large, 1 small. So they get together and their offspring are 3 small, 1 large. Well, the large one is eaten. The 3 small ones survive. So eventually there's nothing but small. So that would be natural selection. So this fish, in this case, is driving this natural selection because it's eating the larger organism. All right, and then we've got fitness levels. So fitness is how are you able to survive and adapt. So we've got a lower fitness. They're not going to have as many children and not as many grandchildren. So their traits, whatever those traits are not going to be passed on as frequently. And then if they've got a higher fitness, meaning they're just able to survive better, chances are they're going to have more offspring, especially in nature. And so you've got lots of offspring here, lots of grandchildren. So those grandchildren are multiplying and they probably have that same trait of higher fitness, whatever that might be. And so they are passing on their genes. And eventually you've got a population that is very abundant in this type of bird versus this type of bird. And so that's another example of Darwin's finches or how things occur in nature like that. All right, so there's random processes that make this occur. So we've talked about mutation, gene flow, genetic drift, bottleneck effects, and founder effects. So we're going to talk about each of those. All right, so mutations. So here we've got this black little mouse, and there's a mutation. He has black fur. All the rest of the mice have white. It's not really hindering him. He's not getting eaten more often. It's not hurting him. And so it's a mutation that's just a mutation. And so now all of them reproduce, and now we have those traits are more abundant now. And continuing, they're going to maybe be 50-50 in the environment. If for some reason eagle or whatever is eating it, fox, can see it better, then maybe that will change over time. Maybe mice are easier to spot. So maybe they live in the tundra, or something. And so definitely that would cause it to decrease in population. But if there's nothing eating it or nothing different, then it'll just be another trait in the environment. And then gene flow is how the genes move from one population to another. So are the populations able to go from one population or one community to the next and reproduce, or are they isolated? So if they live on an island, they might be completely isolated. If they live where they can migrate to and from different communities, then that gene flow is going to be high. So gene flow is just referring to bringing new genetic material. So for the human population, gene flow is as high as it can probably be because humans can migrate to continents, we can fly, we can travel all over the place. Whereas organisms can't do that. Organisms can't travel across the ocean and reproduce and then come back. And so the gene flow for humans is very high. Gene flow for other organisms not as high as humans, but some organisms higher than others. All right, so if we look at gene flow, this is an example of the Florida panther. And so basically, the Florida panther is isolated. So it's not able to reproduce with very many other panthers. And for some reason, there was this kinked tail trait that was really prominent in the Florida panthers. And so it was not allowing them to hunt very good. So you can see the kinked tail versus the straight tail. So the kinked tail, they weren't able to move as easily. They weren't able to hunt as easily because their tails are a balance, weight for them. And so they were not thriving. And they were not able to migrate like they used to be and migrate with the Texas panther. And so what humans did was they brought some Texas panthers and populated them in Florida. And so now notice what happened. So we have way less of the kinked tail because these Texas panthers didn't have that. They didn't have that trait at all. So now instead of having a huge abundance of this not so good trait, now we have more natural selection. Now we can basically, this might be selected against, and we might not see the kinked tail after a while. So now you can see in Florida, these panthers, there's more that have the straight tail. And so that's an example of how humans kind of monitor that situation and have helped. So it's pretty significant. It says down here, 30 went from 30 individuals to 160 individuals. So the Florida panther was almost extinct because of this. And so we kind of stepped in, and they used to migrate anyways. That gene flow used to happen, but because of humans, it doesn't. And so we don't want to be the cause of the Florida panther disappearing. And so we had to step in and help out because we are the cause of them not being able to migrate in the first place. All right, so play this video.
Today, thanks to the efforts of organizations like the Nature Conservancy, the number of Florida panthers that roam the South Florida landscape is growing. About 160 panthers are thought to exist today, up from only 30 in 1995. Will this momentum continue? Can these iconic animals in our communities thrive together? Yes, but we all must play a role in realizing this vision. The tiny piece of our planet Florida panthers call home is simply too small. Cities and other barriers make it almost impossible for panthers to roam and grow.
The panther has been tenacious, and while their levels have dropped over time, we've seen them rebound with science and conservation coming together. But they're now at a critical point. They've reached carrying capacity. That's the amount of population they can have in the area they currently live.
In 2012, the Nature Conservancy purchased the narrow passage where panthers are crossing the Caloosahatchee River. Protecting this passage gives panthers access to healthy habitat to grow and raise their young. But that habitat could go away if we don't act now.
They need more land. And the great thing is that land's available.
This area of Florida matters to all of us. These natural and agricultural areas clean our water and air, and the recreation and economic opportunities they present are primary reasons why so many people live in and visit our great state. We have the chance to secure a healthy future for the land, for us, for the panther. What if we miss this opportunity? You can be a part of making sure the number of panthers in the wild can head in the right direction, meaning that this area continues to support not only their growth, but ours too. Today, 160. Tomorrow,
So you can see how humans have stepped in and played a big role, and that's basically environmental science. So environmental science is studying these types of things. It could be issues with panthers. It could be issues with green energy. So there's all kinds of things that we're going to talk about. But as far as environmental science, this is a huge understanding and a huge step in that. All right, so genetic drift is looking at random mating and random genetic change over time. So it's just a random process. So this organism mating with this organism and carrying on those genes in a random fashion is what genetic drift is. So in a small population, it's pretty huge. If there's a genetic change, like the panther, for example, with the kinked tail, that was a small population. So that gene, even though it's not very good gene, is carried on because there's not many choices. In a big population, a gene like that would fizzle out. All right, so we can see genetic drift here. So this is looking at a small population. So we've got two black mice, 40% black, 60% white. And so you can see very quickly a black mouse, if it's not selected for, like let's say they don't want to breed with the mouse for some reason. So it goes and the population is now white, all white. But in a large population, even though that mouse might not be selected for with reproduction, it still exists because it can generally find a mate. So even if a lot of them don't want to mate with that one mouse, it can still find a mate and it still is there in the population. So a large population, there's a lot more genetic diversity. A small population, not as much. And so that's really important, especially when we get to like small islands and things like that. We can see things disappear real fast. All right, and then this bottleneck effect, this is basically the panther. So thinking about the panther, so there's this reduction in genetic diversity because the population's reduced in size and they're not able to migrate, so you don't have that gene flow. And basically it could lead to extinction. So the bottleneck effect is just all species, and I'll show you in a minute, go through a bottleneck. So they go through like a filtering out of a lot of different genetic material. And so what's left is this very small population that's not very diverse. And so that could easily lead to extinction. All right, so here's that Florida panther again. And so here, well, not Florida panther, this is showing something different, but this is showing spots, so maybe a jaguar. So we've got these jaguars. And so notice how they go through this bottleneck where they filter down, and for whatever reason, only a few survive. So it could have been disease or something like that, or physically just moving to a different location. So the survivors are these. So we've got this larger spot, smaller spot, and then this bottleneck. Notice how these ones all disappeared. So we lost this genetic diversity, this smooth, not spotted coat. So then down here we have a population that has zero or no spots. So we lost that diversity. And then you've got a much different combination. So you've got 33% small spots instead of 50. So it definitely changed the genetic makeup. And if this smooth coat was something that was maybe a new mutation that would have been much better for the survival, that's gone now. And so now these organisms, maybe the spots are not good anymore. And so that organism could become extinct. So that's the bottleneck effect. Something happens where it goes through a really small reduction in genetic diversity. And it could be a variety of things. This could be human cause. This could be disease, something along those lines. All right, and then the last one is the founder effect. So founder effect is, think of a founder like going to another like island, for example. We'll actually do a lab for this. So it's kind of fun. You guys are good to throw stuff onto paper. But anyway, so you've got an island out here. And so notice how the bluebirds did not make it out there. So the bluebirds, maybe they can't fly as far. And so they're not going to populate that island. And so you've got these white and the red that are flying out there. And so this island is going to have a different genetic makeup and diversity than this island. And so that's the founder effect. And this could cause a bottleneck effect. So for example, this could, maybe these bluebirds are going to be more genetically better, but they don't come out here. So you've got this kind of not weaker population, but you've got a different population out here than you do on the mainland. And then this is basically like Darwin's finches again. So you've got these birds that migrate to these different islands and they become genetically diverse, so much so that maybe they're a different species, 100 years from now or 200 years from now, because they've changed so much they cannot breed with the main island or mainland things anymore. And so that's how different species evolve, basically, especially if they're isolated and there's no gene flow. So let's say they come out here and they don't go back. Then there's no gene flow between the two. So evolutionary wise, they change over time. So that would maybe present a new species. And that's it for Module 15. So I will see you next time.